And now, Time Out for Parents, featuring your host, renowned parenting expert, Dr. Boswell Oblivious, PhD, DHP, and GAS BAG. Dr. Oblivious is the author of Discipline is for Dummies, the best-selling guide to letting your children raise themselves. Today, Dr. Oblivious is joined by his own children, Mumps and Rubella, who will demonstrate the effectiveness of the Oblivious approach to...
Would you believe that I have met a number of so-called experts, such as Dr. Oblivious, PhD, gas bag? I'll bet you have too. And as a matter of fact, I think I had a professor that fit that description pretty appropriately. But they've offered this permissive and unworkable advice to parents about child rearing for at least 60 years. The misinformation that they've spread about accounts for much of the confusion that we see today about the nature of children and how to manage them properly. But parents are also handicapped by another problem. It has to do with the disappearance of the extended family. You know, in the past, grandmothers and aunts and neighbor women showed new moms how to mother, and they taught them invaluable parenting techniques and encouragement. But now young moms are pretty much on their own, and there's no one around to provide needed counsel and advice. And without that wisdom and experience, many parents look at the babies that they've born and they have no idea how to discipline or train or guide them. You see what I'm talking about in restaurants and airports and supermarkets, where mothers often seem just totally frustrated with their unruly boys and girls. You know, I once knew a mother like that who had 4 children that were totally out of control. I mean, they were loud and aggressive and disrespectful to adults. And this mother's system of controlling them came down to a very simple formula. When they became especially noisy or cantankerous there in the backyard, she would rush out the door about once every hour and scream, "I have had it with you kids. I've just had it with you." And then she'd turn and go back in the house. I don't think they even knew she was there. Apparently this mom felt it was sufficient for her to kind of burst out the back door like a cuckoo clock every hour or so and remind them that she was still on the job. There has to be a better way to deal with difficult kids than that. Let's look briefly at the discipline of children and consider why it's so important to lead them with confidence.
I hate being the bad guy. I'd like to be the soft, quiet mom that says, "Oh, honey, would you do this?" And the child says, "Sure, Mom," with a beatific smile and goes off and obeys.
Well, I understand how difficult it is to confront a child who's misbehaving because, you know, we love our kids so much, and it makes us uncomfortable to feel like we're the bad guy at home. Nevertheless, it is important to understand that discipline is not something parents do to a child. It's something that's done for him or her because kids need to know where the boundaries are. Let me illustrate. Imagine that you're driving a car over a huge canyon, such as the Royal Gorge in Colorado. And that bridge, of course, is suspended hundreds of feet above the canyon floor. Now, suppose there are no guardrails on the side of the bridge. Where would you steer your car? Well, right down the middle, of course. You know, you need those protective railings even though you don't plan to hit them. You just feel more secure knowing that they're there. Well, that's the same way it is with children. There is security and defined limits. They need to know precisely what the rules are and who's available to enforce them. And when these clear boundaries exist at home, you know, a child never gets in trouble unless he deliberately asks for it. And as long as he stays within those reasonable, well-marked guardrails, there's happiness and freedom and acceptance for everybody. Well, let's look in again on Dr. Oblivious as he illustrates for us the importance of defined limits.
We now return to Time Out for Parents, featuring your host, renowned parenting expert, Dr. Boswell Oblivious, PhD, DHP, and BOLOGNA. Today, Dr. Oblivious has ordered workers to remove the walls of our studio in order to give his children the freedom they so richly deserve. It may be hurricane season, but not to worry. Dr. Oblivious knows what he's doing. What matters is that these children are free to be creative.
As I hope Dr. Oblivious observed there, there are matters of safety to be considered in these issues. I remember one day when our kids were very young, I was watching their hamster run around in his cage, and he was gnawing on the bars and trying to lift the cage door and doing everything he could to escape. Then I noticed our little dog Siggy, Sigmund Freud, watching that hamster from the shadows, and his ears were pointed straight up, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was thinking, "Come on, baby, break through to freedom. I'll give you a ride you'll never forget." Now, if that little hamster had been so unfortunate as to have achieved his desire for freedom, he'd have been dead in a matter of seconds. We could see that from where we were. Loving discipline operates like that. Even when it is caring and loving, it may seem like a cage to some children because they lack the perspective to see what awaits them beyond the bars. If you love your kids, lead them. You have the authority to take charge at home. Use it.
How do we know that our children understand that we still love them even when they're being punished?
Children need to experience a generous portion of authority and leadership at home, but they also need to know that they're loved beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, these are the two most important ingredients in the parent-child relationship, love and control, and they operate in conjunction with one another. Let me illustrate it like this. I have here beside me a copy of my first book, Dare to Discipline. It's kind of dog-eared now. It's been around a long time. It was written in 1970. And on that first edition, there was this little scale with a line and a triangle underneath kind of representing the fulcrum. And it shows love on one side and control on the other. Now, the point I was trying to make is that if you as a parent tip the scale in either direction, there can be trouble. For example, tilting toward a high degree of control in an atmosphere of oppressiveness and rigidity, along with the absence of love on the other side, often creates some serious emotional problems. A child who isn't loved will wither like a plant without water. But the other extreme is damaging too, and this is often not understood, where there is a doting, overpossessive kind of love on the one hand, but then a complete absence of control on the other. That also produces an unfortunate outcome. A primary objective of parenting then is to keep the two essential ingredients, love and control, in proper balance, which is a lot easier to sit here and talk about than it is to achieve sometimes, but it can be done.
We return once again to Time Out for Parents, featuring your host, renowned parenting expert Dr. Boswell Oblivious, PhD, DHP, and our topic is parental authority, outdated concept or stupid idea. To illustrate, Dr. Oblivious is putting his own children in charge of today's program. Here comes little Rubella. She's in charge of videotaping her father. Oops, it seems Dad's pipe has gone out. But here comes Mumps to the rescue with a state-of-the-art flamethrower. Who says children need adults in authority over them? Left to their own devices, kids always know what to do. Right, Dr. Oblivious?
Well, I hope it's clear now that parental leadership is a God-ordained assignment that not only makes things more peaceful at home, but it's also in the best interests of children. The next issue we're going to deal with is the distinction between childish irresponsibility and willful defiance. Understanding that difference will help parents know when to discipline and how excited to get about a given misbehavior. We're going to talk about that next time. I'm Dr. James Dobson. I'll see you then.